Fingers crossed.
Okay, Nick is back.
And Nick is back.
How did we lose Nick as well, did we?
No, he left the meeting just to check that you had the link.
No, I was on the wrong Zoom link. Sorry, guys.
Yeah,
I was just about to send a text message to say, where is everyone?
You were on the first one, were you?
It must have been.
Yeah,
I thought I'd flagged the latest one, but I must have. Anyway, I'm here now.
Now, did you have any slide or anything you want to share?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
Now? So, welcome. My name's Nick Rose. I'm the Executive Director of Sustain, the Australian Food Network. And it's my very great pleasure to welcome you to the start of a very special week. This is in the middle of Australia's first Urban Agriculture Month. And this is the week of the third National Urban Agriculture Forum. And we're kicking it off with a really fantastic panel discussion this evening of Churchill Fellows past, present and future. The title of this evening's webinar is Global Perspectives, Local Impact, Churchill Fellows in Urban Agriculture. So before going further, I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation. Wish to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Acknowledge this is unceded Aboriginal land, and also wish to acknowledge any Indigenous persons that may be with us either this evening or watching this subsequently, and also pay my respects and acknowledgement of country wherever you may be joining us from this evening. All right, so with that said, I'm now going to hand over to my fellow panelists, my fellow Churchill Fellows, to introduce themselves, and then I'll give a little bit of a brief introduction of myself as a Churchill Fellow after that, and then Naomi will be facilitating a discussion between myself and David Mason for a few minutes. After that, we'll hear from Gavin, Naomi and Fiona as current and future Churchill Fellows, and then we'll have time for some questions and discussion. So over to you, Naomi.
Good evening, everyone. I'd just like to acknowledge that I am residing at the moment on Gunai country, just east of Melbourne this evening, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, land that has never been ceded. I was awarded a Churchill Fellowship in 2019 to study the community garden networks in the UK, the US and Europe. I'm the president of Community Gardens Australia, and as a small organisation that's been in existence for getting close to 30 years now, I felt that it was time for us to really get some deeper learnings from organisations around the world that are doing some really wonderful things for community gardens in the places that they're at. There's nowhere else that you can go in Australia when you're the peak body for a community gardens network to learn further about how we could develop our organisation and grow it and make it bigger and stronger. So I applied for a fellowship to go and study the American Community Gardening Association, the European Federation of City Farms, and the Social Farms and Gardens in the UK. I was very much looking forward to starting my travels in August last year. As we all know, COVID has put a big stop to that for a couple of years at the very least. But it has certainly been an amazing experience being awarded the fellowship, and I very much look forward to being able to undertake my travels in the near future. So I'll hand you over now to David to explain about his fellowship.
Yeah, thank you, Naomi. Hello, everybody. My career in agriculture began in 1966 as a jackaroo, and I went on to manage or co-manage a number of private farms, and then joined New South Wales Agriculture and managed 4 of their research stations managed an agriculture project in Sri Lanka in the mid-80s, in the 1980s, land and development and settlement program. But my work in agriculture in Sydney began in 1992. I was with the DPI, or Department of Ag, which was primarily to deal with the issues associated with agriculture in Sydney's urbanising environment. As time went on, my efforts became more and more concentrated on seeking how to have agriculture recognised as a worthy and legitimate land use and industry, and to have it included in Sydney's planning programs in order to optimise its contribution to food security in the context of the increasing climate and economic variability and uncertainty. My perspective on agriculture is quite broad in that regard, as attested to in my Churchill study report, Appendix A, the different forms of agriculture, which extends from backyard, community and communal gardens, rooftop, school ag plots, historical, lifestyle, hobby, farm gate agritourism, equine, floodplain, flood-free, controlled environment. So I was dealing with quite a range, not so much the backyard and the community, because of the emphasis of government on just economic returns and the bottom line. But and a couple of significant outcomes of my professional work include I facilitated the development of the strategic plan for sustainable agriculture for the Sydney region, and I can talk more about that. That is a plan that was released by the Minister for Agriculture back in 1998, and I co-facilitated the development of Hawkesbury Harvest, and I was its foundation chair and a member of the board for 14 years. Hawkesbury Harvest is a multifunctional agricultural organisation that contributes to farming, family and rural community development and viability. That work, those two factors significantly contributed to me being awarded a Churchill Fellowship in 2006, which was to identify how sustainable agriculture can benefit the quality of life of Australian communities. I visited Singapore, the UK, and the Netherlands, USA and Canada. And the major themes to come out of my trip were local food, direct marketing, innovation and adaptability of urban agriculture, the urban agriculture public health relationship, and agriculture land preservation. Thank you. Who do I pass to now, Nick?
If you could pass on to Gavin, David.
Gavin.
Hi everyone, I'm just going to share the screen with you. Welcome everybody. I'm Gavin Hardy. I'm a practicing landscape architect, and I'm also the Queensland coordinator of the National Community Gardens Network, Community Gardens Australia. I've been awarded the Churchill Fellowship last year. I'm very excited and humbled to have received that. And what I'm looking to do is to investigate the potential of community food forests and community orchards. Looking at their design, the processes around them, and their operations. And I'm looking to travel to the United States, Canada, UK, and Italy. My speculation is that these sorts of systems might be more appealing to a wider cross-section of the Australian community than the current way we do community gardening, which is mainly the allotment style of gardening where we grow annual vegetable crops. So that's sort of what I'm looking at. And as you can see in the imagery, these places can be quite delightful, lovely places to be in. Image at top left is at Strathcona Community Garden in Vancouver. Top right is a garden in Seattle where people are bagging fruit, and bottom right is probably the world's oldest community food forest, where I think in Morocco, which is several hundred years old. And then an image that left the screen showing what a forest garden or a food forest is. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Let the other guys talk. I'm going to hand over to Fiona right now.
Hi, I'm Fiona. I will also share screen to give you a little intro about myself. Okay, so I'm Fiona Buning. I run a business called Ainslie Urban Farm in Canberra, and I was awarded a Churchill Fellowship last year to investigate urban farm ventures that provide vocational pathways for aspiring food growers. As I said before, I run a business called Ainslie Urban Farm, growing and selling microgreens to about 30 restaurants in Canberra. I have a background in permaculture, having taught with both David Holmgren and Bill Mollison, and I'm very passionate about food growing. My husband and I have transformed 2 properties using permaculture principles, and for 8 years I taught sustainability at Marici College in Canberra, where we won 2 awards for our Productive Kitchen Garden and Sustainability program. Oh, just waiting for the next slide. Here we go. So in this slide, you can see the before and after photographs of our current home here in Canberra. We have over 50 fruit trees, vegetable gardens, chickens, bees, rabbits, and 2 greenhouses on 1,000 square metres. I'm very interested in the future of urban agriculture and food growing in general. I do see a role for protected cropping, so growing under covers and in greenhouses and so on, but I have some big questions about the sustainability of big ag. These photos here show big ag in action in a 5-hectare greenhouse. I'm actually passionate about soil-based growing. So here are some pictures of me in action in the garden and some of our produce. I really like soil-based growing because of the health benefits of the food, the ability to be regenerative, and also the ability to sequester carbon in the soil. And lastly, here are some more pictures from our own place. And what I'd like to conclude with is the potential to grow significant quantities of high quality food in urban areas is actually enormous. And so I look forward to hearing more from the speakers and the audience today about food growing. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Fiona and David, Gav and Naomi. That was really terrific. So just before we get into more sort of in-depth discussion, just a little bit about my Churchill Fellowship. So I'm just going to share a couple of things very briefly. Now, can everyone see that document, Urban Food Security? Is that coming up on the screen okay?
Yep.
Yep. So this was really the context, I guess, for my Churchill Fellow. I've been interested in sort of community gardens, local food, up in Bellingen, where I was living from 2006 to 2010-11, great part of the mid-north coast of New South Wales, Bellingen, Coffs Harbour way. And I was fortunate enough at the end of my PhD on food sovereignty to get involved in some research through what was called the National Climate Change Adaptation Research Facility. This was the first look they'd done at the role of urban agriculture in meeting climate change adaptations. This is back in 2011, 2012. So that was really the context for my Churchill Fellowship. And just very quickly, that research was really about, as they put it, increasing our knowledge of the current extent of urban agriculture in Australian cities, review the capacity of urban ag to play a more prominent role in enhancing urban food security and urban resilience, and assessing the impacts of climate change on the capacity of urban agriculture to enhance food security and urban resilience. So that was the context for my Churchill trip. And I guess what I would say about the Churchill Fellowship experience is that it's a really unique and fascinating and wonderful way to travel. And I did 150 interviews in 2 months, met a number of more people than that, visited about 90 different organisations, and was just blown away by the enthusiasm and passion and inspiration people had for growing food in urban contexts in the places I went to, which was Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, Toronto, and then across 5 provinces in Argentina. Looking at innovative ways that people were using kind of abandoned and vacant and underutilized lands to meet critical food security needs and also create livelihood opportunities from a food justice perspective. So, just came back hugely inspired and motivated to try and push forward this agenda in Australia, which is really what the Churchill Fellowship is all about, is going away to learn and be inspired and bring back those lessons and try and make a difference for the benefit of the Australian community. So talk a bit more about that now with Naomi and David, but just a wonderful and humbling experience, and one that I can't recommend highly enough if you ever get the chance to apply for it. So that's me. So I think now we're just going to a bit more of a bit of a chat, Naomi, with David, I think is the next bit that we have.
Yeah, that was the plan, Nick. So David and Nick are the 2 fellows here that have actually completed their travels and have brought their learnings back to Australia, which is wonderful. The other 3 of us are waiting for the C19 factor to disappear. I've got a few questions for both of you so that you can share some of your experiences with us. And I thought it might be nice to start off with what your favourite memory of your fellowship travels was. David, would you like to start with that?
Well, I think the favourite memory. Okay, look, there were so many, but it was the enthusiasm, I think, of all the people. I met a lot of people, and over the 8 weeks, hundreds of people. I went to a few conferences and so forth, and everyone was so passionate about urban agriculture and agriculture in the urbanizing environment and trying to protect it. And I think that it gave me hope for the future that, there were enough people who perhaps could make an inroad into ways of bringing urban agriculture to the fore and finding its right place in our society as a social enterprise, but also even providing economic basis for food production more so than it does now. So I guess that's my favorite.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
And Nick, how about you? What's your favorite memory?
Oh, look, again, like David, just so many. But can you see the photographs on the screen there, Naomi?
Yeah.
Yeah. So many memories, so many wonderful, lovely people doing amazing things. But I think the couple there holding the animals. I think the one with me holding the chicken and the guy there holding the goat. He was actually a policeman from Chicago. So that was the first place I went to, Southside Chicago. Meeting this couple that basically turned their small block in inner urban Chicago into a little kind of livestock farm. They had about, I think, 6 or 7 goats and 15 chickens and even a pig, I think they had there as well. Just extraordinary, how passionate they were about the animals and looking after them, the milking, and that was a great couple of hours I spent hanging out with them and their animals. But that was one amongst so many wonderful memories.
Yeah, wonderful. I think you both sort of highlighted there. I think when I applied for my fellowship, and you start speaking to people that have done theirs or know of people that have, it's the one thing that really seems to come through. It's the people that you meet along the way, isn't it? That really makes the experience and gives it so much power and value.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's right. That's exactly it. It's whenever I kind of like feel a bit demotivated or the things seem overwhelming, I just kind of like think back to people working in really difficult circumstances, much more challenging than anything I've faced in my life, and what they were achieving and what they were doing is just an endless well of inspiration, I guess, to sort of, keep me going.
Yeah, as time's gone on, I've become more aware of the value that urban agriculture is going to play in dealing with global warming. I have absolutely no doubt about it, and I think it's that sense of community that is so strong amongst those who understand it, and therefore, we have to make sure that more and more people do understand it, and that's an education process. But it's, I think it's going to be quite a very valuable instrument in dealing with food supply and quality food and public health and a whole range of issues.
Yeah, most definitely. So Nick, I've known you for quite a while now, personally. So you seem to have achieved a huge amount since you've returned from your fellowship travels in the urban agriculture space. Would you like to give us some of the highlights of what's happened since you have returned with your
work? I went away in 2014, so 7 years this year was my trip, and since coming back, I think this space has really really taken off, and I think COVID has really given it a great big push in the last 12 months in particular. But I'm thinking, the community garden kind of conferences, the work that you and your colleagues have done in community gardening, Naomi, is really, taking off. I mean, you can speak to this more than I can about the numbers of community gardens. I think that, you're just getting a bit of a handle now on just how many there are around Australia. Some, of course, very long established, but many, starting up. The rise of verge gardening, people sort of like taking over those spaces. Where I used to live in North Melbourne, here in Melbourne, raised beds, wicking gardens, those kind of things in the verges. And really, a lot of my effort and the work of Sustain and colleagues here tonight, Ariana and Georgia are with us tonight, who've been working in this with us for the last a year and more, has been around, building a sense of a movement and urban, a real kind of sense of that urban agriculture is a big and growing movement in Australia, and that's been the idea of the Urban Agriculture Forum, the first one that we did in 2016 at Melbourne University's Burnley campus. We had about 150 people. Then in 2018 here at William Angliss, we had a couple of hundred people over a couple of days in February 2018. And now this year as well, and with the first Urban Agriculture Month. And that's on the back of groups like Grow It Local, the rise of the Diggers Club, the Pandemic Gardening Survey that we did last year with over 9,000 people responding to that, and just talking about how important, growing food was during the pandemic. Local governments, it's starting to kind of like filter up from the grassroots into policy, local governments creating urban agriculture strategies and dedicated staff roles to resource those strategies. The City of Yarra, City of Darebin here in Melbourne, other councils looking at that as well. It's really moved on a lot in the 7 years since I came back, for sure.
That's amazing. Do you feel that you've done all the work that you would have liked to have achieved with your fellowship travels to this point in time, or do you feel like you could have done more, or you wish you'd done less because you're burning out, or where do you feel like you're at with that, or is this did you have a 30-year plan in place that we'd all be growing food on our balconies by 2050, or
I just see Joel has just joined us tonight, and actually Anna's here as well, and I just acknowledge the work that Anna did on the Pandemic Gardening Survey with us last year. No, I was saying to Joel earlier, we were just chatting before about, you've got to you've got to be in. This is not a matter of like a couple of months or a couple of years, and you kind of like pack up and go away. You know, if you're interested in systems change, and that's what I'm interested in, like, you know, if you really believe that the systems that we're currently living under are fundamentally unfair and unsustainable, and taking us in the wrong direction, and you want to change that, you know, it's the work of, you know, thousands, millions of people over, you know, years and decades. It's something that a really great African-American urban ag leader who I met in Detroit said to me, Malik Yakini, his name is, from the Detroit Black Food Security Network, said to me in 2014 that he went to Detroit in the 1960s as kind of like a radical young organizer in the car factories, believing that the revolution in America was going to happen, you know, in 1967, 1968, when the civil rights movement was at its peak. And what he came to realize is that revolution was not a moment, you know, not something that happened, you know, in a particular point in time, but it was like a whole change in culture that took place over a much longer period. And that's the work that he came to understand was his role. And you know, it really resonates with me that, you know, we're really here about deep culture change. And I think that links into the whole, you know, national conversation about, you know, recognition of First Nation sovereignty and acknowledging that history of Australia and that big shift to, you know, respectful, you know, moving past, you know, the colonial sort of settler reality that I think we're still very much living in, as we've been reminded of in this past week or so with the 30-year anniversary of the Deaths in Custody reports and all the, you know, the marches and protests around that. So, yeah, look, there's a long way to go, you know. I mean, I think a lot's been achieved, but there's a long way to go. But it's great to see so many people now being part of this conversation and part of this movement.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nick. You know, I take my hat off to you. I think you've done, you're one of the movers and shakers in this space, and I hope you continue to inspire us all for many years to come, because it's wonderful what you and Sustain have been doing. Might move on to David here. You know, how about you on this front? How did your travels impact on your work when you returned?
Well, it gave me a greater, obviously a greater understanding of what the potential for urban agriculture was, and agriculture that, you know, in the context of, as I said, increasing the viability of small farms and farming families and associated rural communities. But I went to every dog and cat fight after I came back to talk about what I'd done and what I'd seen and what I would like to see happen. And one of the conclusions that came out of my study tour was the extent to which urban agriculture is going to become part and parcel of our structure, our infrastructure capital, as well as our social capital, as well as our environmental capital, is the extent it becomes a political issue. And I think that's really important. It has to become a political issue. And over time, I got to know just about every mayor and politician in the Sydney Basin. I would talk to them personally. But what I was looking for was a champion who would carry this forward into Parliament, and that never happened because, you know, the issue is always development and the bottom line dollar. But there are a lot of people who really wanted to be involved in that, I guess if someone really would like to know what I did, they could simply Google David Mason Urban Agriculture, and a whole range of stuff will come up about papers I wrote, who I spoke to. I used to talk to Simon Marnie on the ABC as often as I could. We developed a good relationship, particularly through Hawkesbury Harvest. And he's very passionate about local agriculture and urban agriculture, as you're probably aware. But yeah, so it was a whole range of things, such as talking to politicians, talking to local, at all levels. I remember speaking to Tony Burke when he was the Minister for Agriculture, and the urban and the hawkesbury harvest concept was taken into one of his reports and to be implemented on a national basis, the concept of hawkesbury harvest. And as I said, I went to every conference I could. The one area that I couldn't bring about change was in the planning area. You know, since first settlement, developers have driven the planning program in Australia, and you know, you can't beat them. I've come to the conclusion you can't beat them, and you can see what's happening out around Badgerys Creek. I mean, you've only got to look at all the main agriculture areas around Sydney, and you'll see what's happened to agriculture over time. You know, when I first came to Sydney in 1992, the agriculture at the farm gate was worth $1 billion a year, and you put in the you can put into that, because of the intensity of the agriculture, you can put a multiplier factor in of 2 to 3. So $2 to $3 billion of the agriculture was worth in the Sydney area, and over time that's been eroded by development and also by the supermarket system, and that's a real problem, you know. But yeah, so I guess
yeah, no, that's, you mentioned to me on the phone that you've had some frustrations
with planning,
with that planning.
Yeah. And as a public servant,
yeah.
I couldn't bring about a lot of change. It takes time to bring about change. When this strategic plan for sustainable agriculture was released by the minister in 1998, strangely enough, urban agriculture wasn't included within the Department of Agriculture's strategic plan for 10 years, but we eventually made it. And that's the thing about change. It takes time.
That's it.
It takes time.
It takes time.
It just doesn't. You've got to keep talking to people. You've got to keep pushing the point. You've got to make it political. You've got to have an objective. I was watching the drum tonight with the women's movement, which is before I came down to be part of this. And someone was saying, you know, these movements run out of steam because they don't have an objective, or they don't have, you know, the parties don't come together to really form an objective and develop a strategy. And that's what has to happen with urban agriculture, in my book. Yeah. Yeah.
No, thanks for that, David. That's amazing. And you know, Nick said the same thing, that it takes time. It's you know, it's not just a 1 year focus or a 10-year focus. You know, it's a lifetime of focus and beyond. You know, and it's really about creating a movement, isn't it?
That's right. You got to create a movement. Yeah.
All right.
Well, I'm mindful of the time here, so I think it's time for us to move on. Nick, what are we up to next?
So it's over to you new Churchill Fellows. You've heard from us past Churchill Fellows, so over to you, Naomi, and Gavin and Fiona, to have a few minutes to tell us a bit more about, you know, why you are Churchill Fellow, you know, why you applied, and what you're hoping to learn and bring back, where you're wanting to go, and what kind of inspiration you're hoping to discover. Yeah, why don't you go first, Naomi?
Right, sorry, I've just got a bit of noise in the house here. I was just muted myself then. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to being able to travel. You know, of course, there was the initial disappointment with COVID of not being able to do it last year as I'd originally hoped, and you know, I do see that it's probably not going to be possible till probably around about 2023. But in the meantime, you know, I'd already started making contact with people in the countries that I was going to go and visit. And because, you know, that's what you do before you go on your travels. And I've been able to maintain that contact with those people, which has been wonderful. And I've actually started developing even stronger relationships. So I feel that the delay in me being able to travel is going to have a really beneficial impact on on my ability to learn and gain more from the fellowship when I do eventually get to go, because I've found out more about these organisations already. I feel like I'm going to be able to ask more pointed questions, more really be able to drive down in and get out the real information that I would like to discover out of doing the fellowship, which is going to be, I think, very powerful. And at the same time, you know, life doesn't stop with the work that you're doing in this space just because you can't travel because of a nasty virus. So we're continuing on with our work with Community Gardens Australia, and we are doing what we can to develop the organisation as we go along. With it, you know, not having those learnings already there behind me, you can still do other things in the meantime to continue the organisation going on, which we are doing. So, you know, I feel it's going to be really quite a triply amazing experience when I do eventually get to go. And I think some of the events that that you're hosting, Nick, for over the forum, and some of the people that we've got speaking in that, you know, that's further relationships I'm going to be able to develop more and enhance those learnings even further when I eventually get to go. So, you know, I know I could speak, Gavin here will tell you about it, but I know Gav's been really disappointed about not being able to travel and stuff, whereas I kind of feel like it's going to be even more powerful an experience for me when I do get to go. And I'll be able to bring so much more back from that. So
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the world's changed, hasn't it, in the last 12 months? And yeah, and I'm sure, just as we've experienced here in Australia, you know, the relevance, the importance of community gardening and all these types of things were just kind of accelerated in the places that you're going to, Naomi. So yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and I think that's yeah, the whole space has really changed, hasn't it, Nick, in the last 12 months? You know, people have just become so much more fascinated and directly involved in all things urban agriculture, and particularly with community gardens. We've found and backyard gardening, and you know, it's inspired me, and it's been amazing to see that change.
Yeah.
People, and you know, I still just love the fact that Bunnings ran out of seeds. I love that. You know, that's wonderful. If we can keep that going,
yeah,
you know, every
absolutely.
growing season, Bunnings runs out of seeds, that'd be wonderful.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks, Naomi, and yeah, I hope you get to make your trip. Yeah, it's certainly in 2022, and that it's a wonderful experience when you get to do it. All right. Shall we hand over to Fiona to tell us a bit more about what you're wanting to do, Fiona, on your trip?
Sure. Okay, so the origins of my project really come out of being a business operator in the food space, because I have become aware that there's an absolute unmet demand for really good quality, local, fresh, healthy food. And then as being a teacher, working with teenagers, I observed there was a big educational gap in terms of no training for people who want to become an urban food grower, because it's not horticulture and it's not agriculture. So that kind of gave rise to this idea of my fellowship. So I'm planning to visit really well-recognised, successful and innovative urban farm ventures. So I'll just tell you a bit about the places I plan to visit. So the first place I wish to visit is called Soul Foods, which is in Vancouver, and that is North America's largest urban street farm, producing 25 tonnes of food per year over 5 acres. And they train and employ homeless people and drug addicts who say that the farm gives them a reason to get out of bed in the morning. So that's a particularly inspiring project. Intervale Centre is in Vermont in the United States, and that's the oldest farm incubator. It's over 25 years old, and they have over 9 food-related enterprises. And it's internationally recognised for its sustainable agricultural enterprises. Growing Home is a facility in Chicago that's an urban farm and training program, and their curriculum, as well as teaching rigorous real work. They also have units on motivation, communication, responsibility, and emotional intelligence. And their graduates are employed across the whole industry, from growing food all the way through to food service. Then in the UK, there's an urban farm incubator on the outskirts of Manchester called Kindling Trust. And that's the oldest farm incubator in the UK. After that, firstly, by visiting these farm incubators, I'll learn about the physical setup and the governance and the structure and the funding that has worked to make those ventures a success. So that will help me evaluate what kind of structure will work here in Australia. Lastly, I'll be visiting the Netherlands to look at research and technology relevant to urban farming. Pretty much all horticultural innovations seem to come out of the Netherlands, and they've got people studying plant production, sustainable greenhouse technology, green cities, business development, tiny forests, and comparing production on small-scale mixed farms versus large-scale industrial ones, which is a particular interest. So by the end of my travel, I should have a pretty good idea about what will work here. And then what I actually want to do when I come back, I want to establish Australia's first urban farm incubator, which will consist of a vibrant hub that produces food for sale. And through the process of producing food, the incubator will train people from a whole range of backgrounds to grow food, and then it will actually provide mentoring for them to start their own urban farm food-related enterprise. And the incubator will also provide land, because one of the obstacles to starting a venture is access to land. So the incubator would also provide land. So in summary, the incubator will provide training, employment, mentoring, land access. It will create a wellbeing economy through growing healthy food and providing meaningful work. It will build skills and capacity in individuals and in the community, and it will be scalable. So hopefully it will be replicated in all cities across Australia, and it will spawn green businesses and contribute to greening our cities and improving like physical and mental health. So that's
fantastic. That's amazing, Fiona. Thank you very much. That's a great vision, inspiring, really practical, really grounded, and you're going to visit some amazing projects that have really blazed the trail in that space. And I always tell my students about the Intervale Centre in Vermont. Real standout. You know, Vermont in lots of ways, I think, in this space is a real leader. Growing home in Chicago, I had the pleasure of visiting them when I was traveling some years ago. So, and I've heard about the Kindling Trust outside Manchester in the UK. I think you've chosen some really great places and organisations and people to meet with, and you've got a great vision. And with what's happening in the ACT and the new government that you've got there, and what they're talking about in supporting urban agriculture, and all the discussions going on in Canberra, it's hopefully the stars are aligning to help you achieve that vision. Terrific.
Right. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah. All right. Well, Gav, why don't you wrap us up here, and then we can take some questions and just tell us a bit more about what you're wanting to do with your travels and who you're wanting to visit and be inspired by.
Yeah, great. So I'm just going to share screen again, put up that image again, and talk a little bit about other aspects of urban agriculture that don't involve yields. So I'm really coming at this as a professional registered landscape architect. So I'm interested in the placemaking benefits of community food forest systems and community orchards, also community gardens, allotments, and the idea of connection to place and connection to each other to create meaning and belonging. And really looking at the mental health benefits of these sorts of systems. So I'm looking at how these sorts of initiatives partner with the existing community infrastructure that's out there in the world right now. So how do these places, for example, partner with senior citizen centres, retirement villages, scouts and guides halls, schools, the local library. So how do we integrate these sorts of very localised systems into the existing fabric? It's sort of like a retrofit of the community infrastructure. Yeah, and I am disappointed that I'm not travelling this year, but at the same time, I've really got a lot of benefit out of the delay in travelling, and I've actually met a lot of people through the technology of what we're using right at this moment, Zoom and the like. And to the extent I'm actually now involved in an international research project coming out of the UK, looking at pivoting community orchards into community food forests. And I've also been involved in making a film about community food forests and community orchards, which is going to be released very soon. Some of the projects that I'm looking to visit, I'll be looking at one of the largest food forests in the United States, which is the Beacon Community Food Forest in Seattle. Their ultimate aim is to have a 7-acre food forest. Currently, I think they're about 4 acres in size, and they were one of the first food forests that sort of got food forests or agroforestry on the map, got people talking about it in the United States. I'm also going to visit another great project in Seattle called City Fruit. It's an organisation that actually harvests fruit from the existing tree stock all across the city. So fruit trees in people's backyards or in the community, and they organise around that idea of a community orchard, the whole urban forest. Another great project is one in Miami, which is a schools project where they've implemented 21 food forests in the schools program across 21 schools. And then over to the UK, looking at the UK Orchards Project, which is a £750,000 a year charity that's installed 500 community orchards over 10 years. And they're an amazing organisation, and they're actually the organisation I'm involved in a research project with. They're looking to go from community orchards into food forestry. So yeah, some pretty amazing stuff out there. The thing I really want to do with this is I wanted to inform my professional practice. So I'm looking to pivot my whole landscape architecture practice into this area of work. I've trained in permaculture. I've learned with Bill Mawson and David Holmgren and other great people, but I've always found it difficult to understand how I could actually make a practice out of permaculture. So I'm looking sort of to marry landscape architecture and permaculture through these particular types of systems. I'm also looking to produce a handbook for Australia and ultimately implement a couple of pilot projects. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Fantastic.
Yeah, yes,
that's great, great, Gav. Thank you very much indeed. Again, hugely inspirational, transformative vision that you have, and yeah, the places and projects and initiatives that you're going to visit will, just fill you with energy and passion to take that agenda forward and bring your vision into reality. I'm absolutely sure you're going to go on and do really amazing things, I think.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting. I'm really excited having heard all those 3 projects. So yeah, look, we've had some people put some questions. So what we're going to do now is maybe just for 10 minutes, just kind of like a bit of a chat with these questions that have been put in the chat. And then we're going to, to make it sort of more participatory, we're actually going to go off into breakout rooms. We're going to go into 3 different breakout rooms and have a bit more kind of like explore for 15 minutes before coming back to close things out. So I've got a couple of questions here, which I'll throw open to colleagues if anyone wants to have a go at these. So maybe I'm thinking perhaps Fiona, that you're kind of already doing this, or certainly what you're wanting to investigate will be around this. So this is from Sydney McLennan about what's the role of for-profit enterprises in forwarding the urban ag movement? If anyone's worked with successful social enterprise models in the context of urban ag, I can think of a few. Fiona, do you want to, I don't know if you want to say anything about that?
Sure. So just to clarify the question, do you mean what's the role of for-profit organisations as opposed to not-for-profit? Is that what the question meant, Nick?
Yeah, that's sort of good point.
Yeah, what is the role of for-profit or profit for purpose, you know, social enterprises?
Yeah. My own view is I would like to see what works. One of the issues with Soul Foods that I do know about is it is always needing funding to keep going because they are very much a social enterprise, and because of the kind of people that they are working with, homeless people and drug addicts. It's a very special way of working with that particular group of clients. And so you're not kind of necessarily getting the most productive employees that you would have if you had a more business-driven model. So that is an issue that they are constantly having to seek funding. I actually really like the idea of setting something up that is not dependent on constantly having to apply for grants and get funding. So I like the idea of actually making money from selling the food and also having several training streams. So some training streams people would pay to do training, and other training streams would be like scholarships or subsidised places. And then I would like to think that by training people and mentoring them so that they can establish a business, you are actually creating this whole green economy, which does create real jobs, and the money actually keeps flowing around in the community. So I'm particularly interested in a business profit model rather than a not-for-profit government grant-based thing.
Okay. All right, I hear you. Yeah, definitely as somebody in the not-for-profit space who spends a lot of time applying for grants and writing grants, it's exhausting and can be demoralising, and I get what you're saying, Fiona. All right, so we've got another couple of questions, and this kind of moves from the economic sphere perhaps into the more political one. So might take these two together. I think they're kind of like related, although I suppose, yeah, Judy's kind of asked one that's a bit more specific about Sydney. So Judy asked about lobbying the New South Wales government to plan for more urban agriculture in the floodplains around the Western Sydney airport. A Churchill Fellows led group lobbying the New South Wales government to have a kind of like I don't know, an urban agriculture or urban farming park, I guess, of some form. David, you might have some thoughts about that. What do you think about the prospects of New South Wales government embracing protecting land for urban agriculture rather than handing it over to developers?
Well, yeah, I guess one major concern I have is the elevation of the dam wall. I think that's going to place, personally, I believe that's going to place a lot of pressure for increased development into floodplains. I do know that when the strategic plan for sustainable agriculture was released as I said, in 1998, it certainly set the cat amongst pigeons in regard to the Richmond lowlands. The Richmond lowlands at that time was being bought up at huge profits, or at a huge cost, by sand mining people, organisations. As you know, the Penrith Lakes. I don't know. Some of you probably never knew what the Penrith Lakes looked like before it became the lakes. But you'd go there and it'd just be full of agriculture, dairying, corn, vegetables, and my view of the whole thing was when they dug the hole out and they took all the sand, it was one hit and that's it. Whereas with agriculture, if it remained there, it would have been sustainable for generations and generations, and would have been there, you know, until the world end. But and so anyway, when the strategic plan came out for agriculture, I did have sand miners knocking on the door, saying, asking for an explanation about the quality of the land, and it was some of the best. It's some of the best land in Australia on the Richmond lowlands. Over time, that those sand companies started to sell their land off because they saw that strategic plan as being perhaps something which prevent them from continuing with their intentions, and they sold it off to rich people who could afford it. And of course, those people were mainly horse people. But the fact of the matter is, it didn't go to sand, and it still hasn't gone to sand. You know, the point I'm making, I suppose, is yes, you've got to develop strategies that will stop these people in their tracks and direct and give reason for government not to allow those sort of areas to be developed and retained for agriculture. So any group that can come together to actually start to formulate those plans, I think that's a good idea. If people are committed enough to do it, then why not do it?
Absolutely, yeah, and these have all come to the fore, of course, with the floods that New South Wales experienced in the last several weeks. So you know, I mean, I think this kind of like touches on the next question as well, with Joel, who has asked about an urban agriculture movement and the need to galvanise this. Use forums like the one we're in right now, the Urban Agriculture Forum, to bring stakeholders, advocates and allies together to build a more consolidated voice as an alliance, which can affect the kind of changes that we all know that we need. Look, I think you know, movement building is a continual process of construction and identifying points of shared interest and working together and putting aside, you know, minor differences and looking at what, you know, unites us is much more important fundamentally than what divides us, and looking for opportunities to progress, develop a shared agenda and progress it. And that's exactly what we've been trying to do with the Urban Agriculture Forum, with the Urban Agriculture Month, with the Pandemic Gardening Survey report. We put together a reform agenda, a transformative agenda, not just reforming, but transforming. I think there's so much more to do, you know, like building that collective. But yeah, one of our commitments and challenges is to, having brought the collective together with groups like Community Gardens Australia and Sustainable Gardening Australia and Collingwood Children's Farm and Pocket City Farms, Costa and others, you know, to build that movement, keep that, you know, keep that continuing, and to look for opportunities to advance it, and to, you know, look for wins at the local government level, getting your councils involved. You know, I shared with you in the link, I'm not sure if you saw it, Joel, or others, one of our great allies in the city of Sydney, Jess Miller, who's a really strong advocate for urban agriculture and sustainability more broadly. It's worth having a look at that, because that was her motion put to the full council of the City of Sydney in the context of the Urban Agriculture Month, referencing the loss of productive farmland from around Sydney that we've just been talking about, calling on the City of Sydney to do a lot more to protect that land, and to raise this conversation up to the state level in New South Wales. And there's an MP who wants to have an inquiry into food security for New South Wales. You know, we should be all supporting that, participating in that, and looking for allies and building that movement locally and at the state level, and ultimately federally as well. So it's a really good point. But there's lots of opportunities, there's lots of things going on. All right. I think we might, just in the interest of time and actually kind of like going into the breakout rooms, maybe we'll continue the conversations. And I've seen there's some good things happening on the chat. Maybe we'll go into breakout rooms and continue the conversations there. Gavin, do you want to just kind of like flag us just kind of like some framing questions for discussion, and we'll go away into breakout rooms for 15 minutes to explore these in smaller groups?
Yeah, I can do that. Fiona, if you're comfortable with me doing that, I can share screen of the questions that perhaps you could speak to them. Would that be something you'd like to do?
Sure.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Have a look. Just bear with me, folks. Okay, here we go. So, Fiona, over to you.
Sure. So, what we thought would be really interesting in this next session is just to hear from all the participants in this webinar about what your views are on these particular questions. So these questions may also just serve as a stimulus to get you thinking about what you might like to contribute or ask or discuss. So the first one is, what do you think sustainable agriculture looks like? What is the future of food in the climate emergency? How does urban agriculture help with mental health? And how do we build capacity to overcome the obstacles to urban farming? And if any of you have read Nick's report about the gardening during COVID, some of these ideas definitely came out in that report as being important to people. So we'd love to actually hear from you about what you think about these things.
Yeah, and I guess the idea is that we'll go into breakout rooms and talk about these questions for about 15 minutes, and then come back and maybe spend 5 minutes or so as us panelists sort of summarising what our groups found. So each of the panelists will be in one breakout room each. That's the plan.
Great. Thank you. All right, off we go. We'll see you, see everyone back together in about 15 minutes.
Great.
I'm sending you off now.
Thanks, Dariana. Hi, I can see Judy, Jorge, Sydney, and Natalia.
Hi, Nick.
Hi. How are you, Judy?
I'm good.
Good. Maybe we should just sort of quickly say hello, because Jorge, I know we've crossed paths, but I don't think I know anyone else. So maybe just quickly introduce ourselves, if that's okay. Judy, would you like to start?
Okay, yeah. I'm a landscape architect. I was a Churchill Fellow in 2000, so a long time ago. And I looked at water, blue-green systems, and how to integrate them in planning and design. And to tell you the truth, I'm still struggling to get projects. I'm not working in government. I've always been in private practice. Maybe I should have been in government. It's tragedy. It's been quite a frustrating private practice up and down. However, we are working, just to put you in a picture, on some interesting competitions in China, and the brief is urban agriculture. Even believe it, we don't get briefs like that here. Urban agriculture, sustainability, climate change, hardly any buildings, how do we do it? So right. I'm here to share knowledge and to spin off other things. And fantastic. I'm really also worried about Sydney and what is looking like a disaster in Western Sydney.
Yeah, that was a great question. All right, thanks, Judy. Jorge, would you like to say hello?
Hi, hello. Yeah, we developed a communal garden on the run, Queensland. It's an open and fenced, and we grow social food and donate every week to food banks on the run. And it's a tricky thing. We're trying to develop a food forest, but we know it's a slow process. More immediate benefit is for us to use the science space to grow intensive food by bio-intensive grow garden. double dip. So it's a different avenue of permaculture, which is no dig garden. So we do other way around. We double dig and we grow food intensive in a small space, very close together.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jorge. Natalia.
Hi all. Well, actually, I'm in Spain. I was in Sydney 2 years ago. And recently, because of the COVID pandemic, I have closer friends there. So we start to think about how this pandemic breaks out. And I'm starting a small collaboration with a friend that she's from Sydney. And we are starting to be super interested in agriculture in cities. We are from design jobs and everything, but I don't know. I just catch up in the media this evening and I just joined us and it was a bit crazy, but it's fine. I'm super interested to discuss about it.
Great, fantastic. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us from Spain. That's wonderful. Whereabouts in Spain are you?
Now it's like noon here. We are a bit, I know that yours there. We are in the summer almost.
Okay, which part of the country? Whereabouts in the country?
Ah, sorry, I'm from Alicante, the east.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, welcome. Thank you. And Sydney.
Hi, everyone. I am originally from Canada, but I'm living in Melbourne now. It's been funny to have a few of the fellows mention some of the Vancouver organizations and things that I've interacted with while there. I have a degree in sustainable food systems from UBC in Vancouver, which is kind of how I got introduced to all of this. And yeah, now recently moved back to Melbourne, kind of looking to get back into the food system scene here and get more kind of connections and learn more about some of the initiatives happening locally, kind of navigating my career path at the moment. So definitely excited to hear just some of the amazing things that some of the fellows have accomplished. It's been really inspiring so far.
Great. Yeah. Oh, welcome. Great. Thanks very much for joining us. Okay. Yeah, like we've got maybe 10 minutes or so, I suppose, just to have a bit of a chat about, I mean, we had some questions here, but we don't necessarily have to follow those. If you want to talk about something more specific, I know, Judy, that you were particularly interested in Sydney. I don't know if you want to talk about that more specifically, about the challenge that Sydney's facing, because obviously, as we know, the floods that happened in March, I think have really brought a lot of awareness about just how real the climate emergency is for us now in Australia. Of course, that came on the back of those catastrophic fires that we had, last summer. Things are really shifting quite dramatically in terms of what we're faced with in our cities in Australia. So I don't know if you want to talk a bit more about that and what your fears are for Sydney, and what a possible kind of livable future might be for Sydney.
Yeah, I think it might be worth. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. I think people like David have got a lot more experience politically about Sydney. All I can say is we've been involved on quite a few tender bids. One at the moment, they're calling it the Aerotropolis around the Sydney airport. And I'm a bit aghast at the planning that seems to have got the golden tick. But I do see opportunity for some of the area that has not been sorted yet. So it's still moving around, and it's got this blurb of, it's called, what do they call it? Light industry ? Land. And I'm thinking, what are they doing? It's a floodplain. Haven't we learnt yet? It's like David commenting they want to raise the level of the dam and flood. I mean, it's just getting ridiculous. But I just think the Churchill Fellows generally, this is a really great initiative, what's happening tonight, and I'm really enjoying it. And I think the knowledge base, even of tonight's meeting, if we could get together and have a really serious discussion on how we as a group, even through your organisation, I don't know, or climate change, make it broader from the Churchill Fellows so it has more weight So urban agriculture is one part, but I'm specifically also interested in the blue-green system. So if you stuff up the floodplain, we're just going to get more flooding. And I mean, we've just been through floods and watched people, you know, houses floating down rivers. What else do we need to stop developing on a floodplain? Do we need a comedian to do comics, or haven't we learnt? But also the New South Wales government, unfortunately, I have got not much faith in at the moment. And I haven't had for quite a few years. They're not well educated. We've got one, just to give you, put it in perspective, the minister wants, well, I can't remember, I think it's, no, it was some minister down the South Coast wants to fell 40 metres of trees each side of every road through New South Wales South Coast because of the bushfires.
Right.
And this is getting ground, and I just can't believe it. I'm thinking, where's the opposition? This is just ridiculous. Rather than adopting Aboriginal bush burning, you know, practices and doing things properly, these politicians coming up with the most outrageous ideas. And I just think, I think a lot of people in Sydney don't lobby because they're worried about not getting the next job. But I think time's gone, and I'm really nervous about what the future holds for Sydney. I think we're developing way too many roads and tunnels, and I'm in that space, mind you, but no one's looking at the big picture in terms of sustainable open space systems, and urban agriculture fits very neatly into that system. And I think you guys have got a lot of weight, and I think if we add in the weight with the water fellows perhaps, and get sustainable open space systems and sustainable communities, and focus on health and well-being. Mental health is huge since COVID. We're not hearing enough about it, but I mean, I know friends of a friend of a friend who's suicided, for example. I think the situation's much worse than what we're hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you make a really good point. And I mean, I feel I've kind of like fulfilled my commitment to the Churchill Trust through the work that I'm doing to support urban agriculture, which is what I was kind of funded to go away and research. But I guess what I haven't done so much of, which is why it's really nice tonight to reconnect with the community of Churchill Fellows. And I haven't really, you know, been part of that side of it. And I know they do have kind of social, you know, meetings and those kind of things. But I wonder if there is a kind of like a more focused element to it, or if it is purely a kind of like a networking, more social dimension. But I you know, what you're saying really makes a lot of sense. And certainly, you know, David said the same thing, that if we want change, you know, we have to get involved, you know, and it has to become political, and we have to, you know, we have to make a noise and actually take part in the process, because if we don't, then that space is just vacated, as it has been, to the development industry, and they will pursue other agendas that are not consistent with, you know, a viable future and, you know, a livable future. So I think there is a huge opportunity, and I'm really glad that you've made that point, Judy, and thank you.
Yeah, I think there's huge opportunity, and I want to take that. I'm happy to put the oar in there and, you know, help get that thing going.
Great. Okay. Well, fantastic. Well, let's stay in touch. Make sure that you leave your details, and let's let's definitely stay in touch, because
I'll just share one thing I've learned from China, and this is through Mandarin last year with another job we did there. I know a lot of people got issues with China, but the work we do there is all completely sustainable and helping with climate change. So I don't feel guilty helping them. But I don't know whether you guys have heard of the sustainable fish farming there, where they use the mulberry trees.
I've heard about that. Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, I just came across it last year, and I was just gobsmacked. It's such a basic thing. So they have fish farming, and then the fertilizer from the fish. The fish help. It's all like a, what do you call it, biodynamic system. So one thing helps the other. So the water's clean by the, I can't get it all wrong. The fruit drops in the water or whatever, and the fish eat the fruit, and then it's not harmful bacteria. It's good bacteria for cleaning the water. I'll have to send it to you, but it was just, I can't remember the whole, you know, biological data that you probably want from me. But if you Google traditional mulberry fish farms in China, you'll get all these illustrations on Google.
Okay, all right.
But it is quite fascinating. I was sort of hoping there'll be a few more wacky ideas.
Okay.
I can learn about tonight. But yeah, they're talking about doing whole villages, like 5,000 people, based on a sustainable urban agriculture system.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing that people don't appreciate, that it's seen as kind of like, you know, people just growing a few herbs in their back garden or on their balcony or something like that. But it's, you know, it's hundreds of millions of people. Like, I think, you know, the FAO said 800 million people. This was some years ago. 800 million people involved in urban agriculture, feeding 20% of the world's population. You know, it's, you know, you look at what they did in Cuba after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the sorts of things that you were talking about, Jorge, you know, those kind of like, you know, intensive permaculture, biointensive methods can be incredibly productive, you know, and feed lots of people in small spaces. It's got enormous potential.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll let someone else speak.
Yeah.
Hi, I want to say something. I don't know if you know a book written by Caroline Steele, Hungry Cities.
Yes.
Yeah, I was reading that and I was like, in a way, I don't think that from my perspective, or what, because my dad is a farmer. From my perspective, we know that the agriculture has like another time to do the things, and we are in another rhythm of life. So you cannot, it's quite incompatible to mix these rhythms, no? So I think that I don't know what really means to be agriculture in cities. It's like supposed to replace the agriculture in other parts, supposed like to feed people from the cities. So what's meant to be when we are thinking agriculture in cities, or supposed to change the mindset of people in the way that they consume things or they approach to the food? Because
I don't know that it's intended to replace, you know, other types of agriculture necessarily. I think it's more about the other dimensions of it, the social connection, the mental health, the psychological benefits, the mental health benefits, the green infrastructure in cities, you know, mitigating stormwater runoff and those kinds of things. I think the multifunctionality of urban agriculture is what's really important to bear in mind, rather than, I mean, yes, it can be very productive, and it does, you know, if it's done well, it can grow quite a lot of food, but I don't think that's the main function necessarily. We've got about 2 minutes left, actually, so I'm just conscious that Jorge and Sydney, do you want to just is there anything that you'd like to add to what we've already said, or any other things you want to say?
For my part, I want to see other model happening, other city, you know, practical food grower on city, you know, so we somewhere feel connection and use the language you need to provide by what you do on writing, so we can actually use that language to communicate to our local, you know, government.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that we're doing. We've got a local government. We're trying to educate local government staff about how important this is. So we're doing that, and I can send you some information about that. The Gold Coast. You're in the Gold Coast, aren't you? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can send you some information about that, Jorge. Sydney, do you want to? I don't know if you want to add anything. Just in the last half minute.
Final 30 seconds. I'll just add one thing that I was hearing when Judy was speaking, and a few other people, just answering that question that was posed to the group about what sustainable agriculture looks like. And the initial question was like, oh, think Jetsons and fake meat and blah, blah, blah. I think it's actually going to go backwards and go back to like how the authentic growing food, lack of technology, Aboriginal methods of managing fire, as you mentioned, which I think is really exciting because I feel like there's so much information.
Okay, we all back?
We're back.
We're back. Great. Okay. Well, we've sort of allocated just a little bit of time for this. Maybe just a quick sort of wrap up from the rooms. It'd be interesting to hear what people talked about. We certainly had an interesting discussion in my room, but maybe we'll just go around and just have a quick couple of minutes from each. Naomi, I'm looking at you. Do you want to?
Yeah, I figured I'm like, hang on a minute. David and I were room one, weren't we, David? So I have to admit that we spent well more than half the time discussing what the other people in our room get up to and what their passions are, which was really lovely. So we had Anna and Anita and Anthony talking about what they do, which was really good. So we pretty much only tackled the first question about what does what was our first question again?
What does sustainable agriculture look like?
What does sustainable ag look like?
Yeah.
We basically came up with a very brief one where I think it was Anna who said an aerial view, this snapshot if you're looking out the window of a plane as you come into a city, of islands of green with splashes of colour and food growing everywhere, and that being overlaid with another map on top of that of the social networks and the social capital that's built out of that, and the capacity that lies within that system that builds resilience and the innovation that comes out of that as well. So I think that was it when we'd only just started discussing question 2.
Yeah.
when we got yanked back into the main room. So
no, never enough time. But thank you. That was great. That was great, Naomi. Thanks for that. That sounds like a really great discussion and a great vision. Fiona, what were you talking about? Your group.
Okay, so in terms of what sustainable agriculture looks like, everyone seemed to agree that you really have to address the 3 things. So economic sustainability, environmental and social. And then the point was added that we also need to be trying to give back. So that led into, we could have gone on more, but just the idea of regenerative agriculture, which of course we're only really just starting to get our head around what that actually means. So that was interesting. And then we discussed mental health. Also looking at the fact that climate anxiety is a mental health issue, especially for younger people. And that basically if you're gardening, working with the earth, it's good for your mental health regardless of your mental health state. So everyone benefits. So if it was accessible to more people, that's going to be a win for everybody. And that's about where we were at.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Fiona. Gavin.
I was in Fiona's group.
Oh, you were in Fiona's group. Oh, there was only 3, wasn't there? Of course. Yeah, 3 rooms. So I was with Judy, Jorge, Natalia and Sydney, and it was, again, sort of like fascinating to hear where people are from and what they're doing and what brought them here tonight. And in fact, Natalia's joined us all the way from Alicante in Spain, which is really wonderful to have that international connection. Judy from Sydney, Jorge from the Gold Coast, and Sydney, who's in Melbourne, but originally from British Columbia. We talked quite a bit specifically about Sydney and the challenges facing Sydney in the current context with the floodplains question, and I guess the role of Churchill Fellows. So this is a discussion of Churchill Fellows and the role of Churchill Fellows, I guess picking up on David's point about the need to become politically engaged, and if we are serious about these issues and serious about change, we have to get involved. And there's an opportunity to use the legitimacy, the gravitar, if you like, of the Churchill Trust and the status of being Churchill Fellows in the Australian context to to use our voices together to make these kinds of representations for these kind of changes. So really great idea from Judy, and looking to continue that and follow that up. And that's definitely what we're the whole reason why we're doing this work around urban agriculture in this forum is to build that shared agenda, as I was saying before. So really keen to continue that. And then at the end, yeah, Sydney was just touching on when we were called back on this question of sustainable agriculture and talking about that we're kind of almost going back to the future, maybe in a way. I don't know if Sydney, if you want to just kind of finish off what you were saying at the end there. I know you mentioned braiding sweetgrass there at the end and dark emu. Do you want to just kind of like say a little bit about that in terms of the linkage with First Nations traditions and knowledge and wisdom?
Yeah, so I think what kind of inspired my comment was the prompt and the question about thinking about the Jetsons and growing fake meat and, you know, chemicals and that kind of thing. I actually was thinking we're actually going to go, I say backwards, but it's not really backwards, but kind of looking back to how humans first originally started growing food. And I think there's so much knowledge that we have already without needing to kind of delve into the science of it. Just so many examples of even like the peasant movement in Latin America. And then we were just talking in the chat about Bruce Pascoe's book, Dark Emu, where he mentions a lot of really, really interesting facts about Australian agriculture as well. So that was kind of what I was tying in before. Getting pulled out of the break room. So thanks, Nick.
Fantastic. Well, no, I wanted you to be able to finish that talk. So that was really, really great, really important. All right, look, that's really fantastic. Thank you. I think we're just kind of like coming up to the end of our time here. So I think what we thought we'd do is just, just a very sort of like quick closing thought, perhaps about, you know, maybe that question about, you know, a really kind of like positive vision for the future, empowering vision for the future as we go into this week and into the Urban Agriculture Forum. Don't forget, if you don't know already, that tomorrow we've got a really, if you want to be inspired, we've got an amazing story tonight, Naomi, in conversation with Pam Warhurst of Incredible Edible Todmorden in the UK. I don't know if anyone's heard about that. If you haven't, or even if you haven't sort of like had the opportunity to hear it firsthand, really great story of a town that was sparked into action to make itself green and edible through the leadership of two women owning businesses, owning cafes, I think. So yeah, Ariana's just shared the link there. So that's a free webinar tomorrow. Please come along again, hear that story, share it with your friends and networks. It'll be really fantastic. On Wednesday, we have another webinar with stories from Argentina, from Norway and from the UK as well, International Champions in Urban Agriculture, another free webinar, and then that will take us into the 3 days of the Urban Agriculture Forum on Thursday, Friday and Saturday. So yeah, it's a full week of a full burst of discussion and sharing and networking around urban agriculture in Australia and internationally. So please join us for all of that. But yes, I'd like to just kind of like just hand over to the panelists now for some just closing thoughts and reflections on the discussion this evening, and yeah, what you know, paint us a picture about, you know, your community, your town, your country, you know, in 10, 15 years when you're back from your Churchill Fellowships. Gavin.
Yeah, I'll start off by saying a network of community food forests, community orchards and allotments within walking distance of everyone's house in Australia in well, about 10 or 15 years, but 2050, 2040, yeah, there you go. Oh, yeah, 2050. That's my vision. And to get there, we need actually to continue to tell great positive stories and to get some metrics to measure some of this stuff so we can convince the bureaucrats.
Fantastic. Thanks, Gavin. Fiona.
Well, I'd love to see urban farm training hubs in every town, not just in the big cities, but in regional centres, to provide the fresh food, the training, the mental health, the social programs, like the whole kit. And I think there should be like lots of different ways of doing it. You know, like there's more than one way to skin a cat. So I just look forward to working with people when I get back from the fellowship to make this happen. And also thanks for people who participated. I love some of the ideas. I'd like to get in touch with a few of you, and feel free to get in touch with me. It was really great.
Absolutely. Thanks, Fiona. David. David still with us? Is he still with us?
I think
or is
he might have left us, it looks like, Nick.
No, he's there, but I think he might be on mute.
He's on mute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
David, you are here. If you unmute yourself, yeah. Do you want to just give us some closing thoughts?
I'm going to. What I was saying is, I believe there's going to be a change in consciousness in our society, whether it's just related to Australia or internationally. But I think we're going to see the community play a huge role in dealing with climate change. And I remember back in the late 1980s, the concept of sustainability arose almost overnight, and everyone was talking about it. At the beginning of the year, there was no one talking about it. At the end of the year, everything was talking about it. I remember, going to all these planning meetings within the government, and all we talked about was sustainability. It just happened overnight. It was this change in consciousness, and I believe that that's going to happen with this as well. But maybe I'll still be around. We'll see.
Thanks very much, David. Yes, and Eric has just commented, I agree about consciousness. We are evolving. I certainly feel that, and I think a lot of people do, that this is a time of a big shift, and many people have described it in different ways. So thank you for mentioning that. Naomi.
I envisage community gardens in every community. Nick, I'd like to see that happen by the end of next year. Is that a bit too much? No, the movement's growing daily. That's my big vision. I'd love to see community gardens in every suburb in Australia. I think that'd just be wonderful. And I'd like to thank everyone in the chat this evening too, but the reminder to us that it's so important to work together on these visions that we have. And I think we've had some really great stuff happening over the last couple of years with the people that have come together to put together the Urban Agriculture Forum for you guys, and that we've got a lot of organisations now that are starting to work together in a really fantastic way. We've been loosely calling it the Urban Agriculture Collective. I really love that, and I think it's important that we do work together because together we have so much more impact.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Naomi. And with Sustain, we sort of talk about our vision being to make Australia's towns and cities edible, which I guess sort of captures what we've all really been saying, that it would be a transformation in our culture, in our society, in our country, and in our consciousness. If food and healthy food was abundant and free, and we'd gone beyond the commodity economy where everything had a price tag, where food really was free. Nobody was hungry, nobody was malnourished. The food was rich and nourishing, and sustained communities and brought people together. And really enabled a healing and flourishing culture. And I think that's the opportunity. That's the opportunity in front of us, and that's the work that we're really committed to. So again, just like to echo the thanks of everyone for coming tonight and sharing this space with us. Thank you all. Thanks, big thank you to Ariana for all your work in making this happen. And there's a whole team of people who aren't here tonight who you'll get to meet over the next few days if you're joining us for the range of other events and webinars that we've got. So yeah, please stay with us this week and beyond. And I love the share about the friendship as well. Please, hopefully you've made some new relationships and contacts tonight. I know I have. Let's stay in touch, and let's work together for a thriving, edible future for our communities and our country and the world. So huge thank you, and we will close there. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.